Alright, so our next method of factoring we're going to talk about is the sum or difference of cubes. This is a method, it's technically two methods because we have a sum of cubes, but we also have a difference of cubes. But the process for factoring is going to be the same exact way for both. So I'm going to show you a problem with each. They're very, very, very similar, and so I think once you see that, it'll be pretty easy to do. So we're going to start with y cubed minus 216. And this is a classic difference of cubes. The y cubed is a perfect cube. The 216 is a perfect cube. It is 6 cubed. And so when we factor a sum or difference of cubes, we're always going to factor into a binomial times a trinomial. And so I like to go ahead and put my two sets of parentheses just so I kind of know what I'm looking for. Now, the first term in this binomial is going to be whatever number we'll multiply times itself 3 times, because now we're talking about cubes, to give us this first term. Well, in this case, y times y times y would give us y cubed. The sign that we're going to use is whatever this sign is. And so in this binomial, my sign is going to be minus. And then my second term in my binomial is going to be a number that multiplies times itself 3 times to give me the 216. So I gave a list of perfect cubes in class, and if you know those, and you know that 216 is 6 times 6 times 6, then 6 is going to be our number that we use for that second term in the binomial. Now, once we've identified that, our trinomial is based off of the binomial. And so some people like the acronym SOPS, S-O-P-P-S. And that tells us how to fill in the trinomial. And so the first S means square, because our first term in our trinomial is going to be this term. So the first term in our trinomial is going to be this term squared. So we square y, we get y squared. The O in SOPS means opposite sign. So it's the opposite of what we started with here. So in this case, it'll be plus. The first P means product. It means you're going to multiply these two terms together and get that middle term. So y times 6 is 6y. Notice we're not worried about the sign. The sign's already taken care of. The second P means plus. Means our last sign is always plus. And the last S means square. Means we're going to square this last term to get that last term in the trinomial. So 6 squared is 36. So 6 squared is 36. And now we have a binomial times a trinomial. If you were to multiply all of that back together, you would see that you do get what you started with, that binomial that is a difference of cubes. Now, I do want us to look at another one. This one we're going to do is actually going to be a sum. We're going to do a sum of cubes, and the process is exactly the same. Again, if you know your perfect cubes, 125 is 5 cubed, 8 is 2 cubed. Again, we have our variables that are being cubed as well. And so this 2 is going to factor into a binomial times a trinomial. And so our first term in our binomial is whatever will multiply times itself 3 times to give us the 25m cubed. And so notice it's not just m. In this case, what multiplies to give us the 125 is 5m times 5m times 5m. Now, our sign that we're going to use is still whatever the original sign is in the problem, which in this case is plus. And our second term in the binomial is whatever multiplies times itself 3 times to give us this 8n cubed. And so that would be 2n, because again 2n times 2n times 2n is 8n cubed. And then once we know this binomial, this trinomial is going to be based off of the binomial. So the first term in our first term in our trinomial is this term squared. So 5m squared, 5m times 5m is 25m squared. The sign, first sign, is going to be the opposite of whatever we used in our binomial. Our middle term are going to be these two terms multiplied together. So 5m times 2n is going to be 10mn. And then our last sign is always plus. And our last term in our trinomial is this term squared. So 2n times 2n is 4n squared. And again, there's nothing else we can do with that. That is our final answer. And so we have our factored form, this binomial times trinomial. Now, one thing you may be tempted to want to try to do is to factor this trinomial. This trinomial is prime. It will always be prime. You won't ever be able to factor it, so there's no need to ever try. It is possible the binomial could be factored, but usually that is not the case. And so typically when you finish the sum or difference of cubes, then you are finished completely.